The transport pod hurtled through the void, its life support systems failing with each passing hour. Inside, a young woman from the Volteri species lay curled against the cold metal wall, her violet skin already showing signs of oxygen deprivation. Her people had cast her out for a crime they considered unforgivable. She had refused the male chosen for her by the Council of Elders. The Volteri were an ancient civilization, their culture built upon rigid traditions that had survived 10,000 years. When a woman reached maturity, the elders selected her husband based on genetic compatibility and social standing. Refusal meant exile, a slow death in the black between stars. The pod contained just enough resources to keep her alive for 3 days, enough time to reconsider her choice and signal for retrieval. If she maintained her defiance, she would become another cautionary tale. Her name was Kira, and she had no intention of signaling anything. She had known the consequences when she stood before the assembly and spoke her refusal. The male they had chosen was cruel, known for his harsh treatment of his first wife before a mysterious disappearance. Kira had watched her older sister suffer in a similar arrangement, had seen the light fade from her eyes over years of subjugation. When her turn came, something inside her refused to bend. The elders had been shocked. In living memory, only twice had a woman refused, and both times they had relented within the first day, broken by fear and isolation. Kira was supposed to follow that pattern. She was supposed to break. The pod's temperature continued to drop. Kira's breathing grew shallow, each inhalation a struggle. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother, who had whispered apologies through the door of her cell before the exile. Her mother had wanted to help, but was powerless against tradition. The Volteri way was absolute. Kira was drifting into unconsciousness when the impact came. The pod shuddered violently, throwing her against the opposite wall. Alarms blared as external clamps locked onto the hull. She heard the hiss of pressurization, then the screech of metal as something cut through the outer door. Light flooded the darkness. Kira raised her hand to shield her eyes, expecting Volteri retrieval officers come to drag her back in chains. Instead, she saw a figure in an armored suit, humanoid but wrong in ways she couldn't immediately process. The proportions were different, the movements somehow both clumsy and efficient. The figure removed its helmet, revealing a face unlike any she had encountered. The being had tan skin, brown eyes, and short, dark hair. Male, she thought, though the features were softer than Volteri males, the frame broader but less angular. "Can you understand me?" The being spoke in accented but functional Volteri. Kira tried to respond, but managed only a weak nod. Her body was failing rapidly now that the pod's final reserves were exhausted. "My name is Marcus," the being said, moving into the pod with surprising gentleness for something so heavily armored. "I'm human, from a species called Earth. My ship detected your pod's distress beacon, and we came to investigate." He produced a device that he placed against her neck. Warmth spread through her body as the device analyzed her biology and began administering aid. Within moments, her breathing eased. "Distress beacon?" Kira whispered. There was no distress beacon. Marcus frowned, checking a handheld scanner. "Your pod's automatic systems activated one when life support fell below critical thresholds. Standard safety protocol. The Volteri don't use such protocols on exile pods." Understanding dawned in the human's eyes, followed by something that looked like anger. "They sent you out here to die." "Yes." Marcus was silent for a long moment, then spoke into a communication device attached to his suit. "Captain, we have a survivor, but this wasn't an accident. This was an execution." A female voice responded from the device. "Bring her aboard. Medical team standing by." The human ship was unlike anything in Volteri design. Where her people favored elegant curves and artistic flourishes, the humans built with brutal functionality. Every surface served a purpose, every system redundant and over-engineered. It felt safe in a way Valtteri vessels never had. The medical bay was staffed by 2 humans who worked with quiet efficiency. They asked permission before each procedure, explained what they were doing, treated her like a person rather than a problem to be solved. Kira found herself crying, though she couldn't articulate why. Marcus stayed nearby, his presence somehow comforting despite his alien nature. When the medical team finished their work and left her to rest, he pulled up a chair. "Tell me what happened," he said. "If you want to." So she did. The words poured out in a torrent, everything she had held inside through her captivity and exile. She told him about the marriage laws, about her sister's suffering, about her refusal, and the price she had paid. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Your people," he said when she finished. "They have no concept of individual choice in marriage? Choice belongs to the community." Kira recited the old teaching. The individual serves the whole. That's tyranny dressed up in tradition. The bluntness startled her. In Valtteri society, one never criticized the elders or their wisdom. Even in her rebellion, Kira had framed it as personal weakness rather than systemic wrong. "I don't understand," she admitted. "Humans have different customs?" Marcus nodded. "On Earth, we fought wars over this very issue. Not just about marriage, but about who gets to control another person's life. We decided, after much blood and suffering, that every human has the right to choose their own path. We're not perfect at it, but the principle is sacred to us. And if someone refuses tradition, then they refuse it. Tradition doesn't get to kill people for disagreeing with it." The concept was so foreign that Kira struggled to process it. A society where individuals could simply refuse, where their choice mattered more than ancient custom. It seemed like chaos. "How do you maintain order?" she asked. "We argue a lot," Marcus said with a slight smile. "But we've found that people who choose their own lives tend to build better societies than people forced into roles they hate. Free people are more creative, more productive, more invested in their communities." Over the following days, as the human ship traveled away from Valtteri space, Kira learned more about Earth and its people. They were a young species, barely 6 centuries into space travel, but they had spread across dozens of systems through sheer stubborn determination. They were warriors when necessary, having fought off 3 separate attempts at conquest by older species. But they preferred diplomacy and trade. They were also, she discovered, fiercely protective of refugees. "We have a colony called Haven," Marcus explained one evening in the mess hall. "It's where we send people fleeing persecution. You'd have full citizenship, access to education and employment, protection under human law. Why would you do this?" Kira asked. "I'm not your people. You owe me nothing." "Because we remember what it was like." Another human, a woman named Lisa, who served as first officer, interjected. "My ancestors were refugees fleeing religious persecution on Earth. They nearly died during the crossing to the New World. Other humans took them in, gave them a chance to build new lives. We don't forget that. And because it's the right thing to do," Marcus added simply. The Valtteri delegation arrived at the human ship 3 weeks into Kira's recovery. They demanded her return, citing ancient treaties and territorial rights. Kira heard the transmissions from her quarters, her body going cold with fear. The captain of the human vessel, a gray-haired woman named Rodriguez, denied every request. "She's claimed asylum under human law," Rodriguez stated firmly. "She faces execution if returned to your custody. We don't hand people over to die. She is Valtteri property," the delegation leader insisted. "She has no rights beyond what our law grants. In human space, she has every right. This conversation is over." The Valtteri threatened military action. The human response was to transmit a detailed report of Kira's case to the Galactic Council. along with evidence of the Valteri exile practice. Within days, the council issued a formal censure, and several trading partners suspended agreements with the Valteri government pending reform of their marriage laws. Kira watched the diplomatic crisis unfold with a mixture of awe and guilt. Her single act of defiance, amplified by human intervention, had forced her people to confront practices they had never questioned. The conservative faction raged, but a younger generation of Valteri began speaking out, demanding change. "I've destroyed everything," Kira said to Marcus as they watched the news broadcasts. "No," he replied. "You've started something. Whether your people choose to change is up to them. But they can't pretend anymore that everyone accepts the old ways." 6 months later, Kira stood in the central plaza of Haven Colony, watching the sun set over carefully tended gardens. She had enrolled in university, studying human political philosophy and law. She had an apartment, friends, a life she was building piece by piece according to her own vision. Marcus had been reassigned, but stayed in contact through regular messages. His last one had included news from Valteri space. The Council of Elders had announced reforms to the marriage laws, allowing women the right to refuse proposed matches without penalty. It was a small change, not the revolution Kira might have hoped for, but it was a beginning. She thought about the woman she had been in that failing pod,